Hey everyone, welcome to the Seattle Coffee Gear YouTube channel. My name is John, and today we're talking about something that I get questions about frequently in my day-to-day job as our sales manager here at Seattle Coffee Gear. That question is, should I buy a dual boiler machine or a heat exchanger? We have two machines from Diletta. One's a heat exchanger, one's a dual boiler, and we're gonna compare them. But before we get started, take a quick second and click that subscribe button and also like the video. Let's jump in. Before we can talk about why you might pick one of these over another, let's give some definitions about what a heat exchanger is and what a dual boiler is. A heat exchanger is the original design for an espresso machine. It's been around for over 100 years. And a simplified way to understand a heat exchanger is that there's one boiler inside the machine that's at the temperature to produce steam. It's at about 250 or 260 degrees. It's about 2/3 of the way full of water, and the rest of it is just steam. Two of the main goals of any espresso machine are to heat water to brew espresso and also heat water to produce steam to froth milk. A heat exchanger does both of these things through that single boiler by having the boiler about 2/3 of the way full of water and the rest of that third for steam production. To heat water for brewing espresso, it has a small tube that passes through the boiler. As water enters that tube and passes through, it's slowly and gradually heated to that ideal temperature for brewing espresso, right around 200 degrees Fahrenheit. The manufacturers put a lot of time, effort, and development money into making sure that these heat exchangers are properly calibrated so that water spends the right amount of time flowing through them to reach a good temperature for brewing espresso. Now that we've talked about a heat exchanger, let's discuss what a dual boiler is. As you probably guessed from the name, there are two boilers in this machine. One boiler is just for brewing espresso and the other is just for steaming milk. This style or design of espresso machine is a little newer than the heat exchanger is. Now that we have an understanding about what a heat exchanger is and what a dual boiler is, let's talk pros and cons and why you specifically might want one over another. When I speak with our customers and they're thinking about their next espresso machine purchase, oftentimes the advice they've been given is buy a dual boiler. A dual boiler is great. You should definitely buy a dual boiler. And while a dual boiler is great, it's not always the best choice for every style of coffee drinker. Personally, I have a dual boiler because I drink a lot of straight espresso. I like to take my time dialing in new coffees. I like to play with brew temperatures, and a dual boiler lets me easily do that. That's the big pro of a dual boiler machine, is you have one boiler dedicated to brewing espresso. You can set the temperature of that boiler based on the coffee you're drinking. And if you want to see how that coffee reacts to different temperatures, you can try that too. It's a little bit harder to do that on a heat exchanger. Because that steam boiler is indirectly controlling the temperature you're brewing at, you can't as easily make on-the-fly adjustments because you're more working with a temperature range rather than a set specific temperature like you are on a dual boiler. Now that we've talked about the pros of the dual boiler and the cons of the heat exchanger, let's flip that a little bit. The type of coffee drinker I think a heat exchanger makes a lot of sense for is somebody who primarily makes milk-based drinks. That might be new information to you, but I can back up why I make that claim. In the US, we have 110 volt power in most of our households, with the exception of some dryers or ovens. With the way that heating elements in espresso machines work with that 110 volt power, it means that the espresso machine can only send power to one boiler at a time. On a dual boiler machine, it's going to prioritize sending power to that espresso boiler, so that way your espresso is always brewed at that consistent temperature. But if you like milk-based drinks and you're gonna make a few in a row, that means that espresso boiler is getting all that heat and nothing's being sent to the steam boiler. Practically, if you're making 2, 3, or 4 lattes in a row, you're depleting the pressure that's left over in that steam boiler, but it isn't actively recovering. If you make a lot of milk-based drinks, you might want to consider a heat exchanger. The other con I mentioned about dual boilers is that they're more expensive. You have 2 boilers and you have 2 heating elements, you have 2 of those PID controllers. There's just a lot more going on. If your budget is around, say, $2,000 and you're comparing a dual boiler and a heat exchanger machine at that same price point, the heat exchanger machine is going to be much sturdier. The build quality is going to be better, the fit and finish is going to be better. Just overall, it's going to be a nicer machine to sit on your countertop. Let's take these 2 machines for example. They're both from the same manufacturer and brand. They have the same build quality and fit and finish, but the Alto is a good bit more expensive than the Bello Plus is. This is why it's important to understand what's important to you and where your budget is at, because you could be better suited by taking some of the extra costs from the espresso machine and putting it towards a better grinder or accessories. And not to toot our own horn here, but we have a great sales team. I'm a part of that. And if you have questions like these, please give us a call, chat with us on the website, or send us an email. We'd be happy to help you find your next piece of coffee equipment. Well, that's enough theory about these 2 machines. Let's get practical and pull some shots on both and discuss the differences in day-to-day performance. I've got 2 bottomless portafilters prepped here. We've got crew brew in both, about 20 grams. I did my puck prep the exact same way, some WDT and then a nice level tamp. I'm gonna start by brewing on the Bello Plus. On a heat exchanger, it's really important to flush or purge the machine before brewing. Both of these machines have been on and heating up for about 30 minutes. So that's plenty of time for them to be fully up to temperature. But on this heat exchanger, water hasn't been flowing through that tube, so all that water has sort of equalized with the steam boiler and is now at that same 250 degrees. So I need to purge that out and get water flowing again to get it to that 200 degree range. There's a simple way to do this just using your hearing. The machine's gonna make a crackling noise as water is being purged from it. That's actually flash boiling that's happening. We want to clear all that flash boiling, superheated water out and then start brewing. I'll start here, and then while this is brewing, I'll start brewing on the dual boiler. So that is now purged from this machine. That 250 degree water is way too hot to brew with. It would immediately over extract the coffee. That's why we want to be at that lower 200 degree mark to get a nice balanced, even extraction. I got a 27-second shot over here. Let's see what we get on the dual boiler. We got 29 seconds on the dual boiler. Let's go ahead and taste both, and I can give you my thoughts if I taste any differences between these 2 styles of machines. It's always important to stir your espresso before you drink it, kind of mix it all together. Let's start with the heat exchanger. So right off the bat, I'm getting some chocolate, some fruit. Let's go in for a sip and hope it's not still too hot. That's definitely hot, a little hotter than I'd like. I'd probably let it sit a little longer if I wasn't filming this, but it tastes great. I'm getting chocolate, I'm getting some citrus, some more red fruit flavors in there. I would still drink straight espresso off of a heat exchanger machine like the Bello Plus. It still does a great job. Let's try the espresso off the dual boiler and I'll tell you if I notice any differences here. Smells the same to me. That's interesting. I do feel like the dual boiler tastes a tiny bit brighter almost. Like I get more of the fruit and a little less of the chocolate. I wouldn't say one is hands down better than the other. I'd say they're just different. Sometimes you pull 2 shots back to back with all the exact same prep and they taste a little different. It's just some of the intricacies of coffee. I'd like to say that picking an espresso machine is not just about how things taste. While that's an important part of the picture, there's more to it than just that. Hopefully this was helpful for you as you're considering what to purchase for your next piece of coffee equipment. If this video brought up more questions for you, leave us a comment down below. We'd love to hear from you and perhaps get ideas for future videos. Before you leave, make sure to subscribe to our channel and like the video. And while you're at it, there's a link in the description to sign up for our email newsletter. That'll keep you up to date on sales, promos, and new products. Plus, you'll get a coupon for 10% off your order. Well, thank you again for watching and supporting our channel. I hope you have a great rest of your day and keep making coffee you love.